Ladies and gentlemen, we have some absolutely breaking news today. You see, President Trump's national approval ratings have just shot up through the roof. And so we're going to talk about that in just a few moments. But first, I want you all to take a look at what happened all across the country yesterday afternoon.
Saturday is going to be very busy. I said at the top of the show, there are more than 1,200 protests planned for tomorrow in all 50 states. I stand corrected. It is more than 1,300 protests planned in more than in all 50 states. It's expected to be the largest single day of protest since Donald Trump took office.
And so, folks, just like Rachel Maddow said, yesterday afternoon, far-left progressive protests swept across the entire country. Take a look. You hear that? This is what democracy looks like. You know, these unhinged far-left progressives sure do have a funny way of looking at things. According to them, democracy isn't when President Trump wins every single swing state. Democracy isn't when Trump wins the presidential election with 86 electoral college votes to spare. Democracy isn't when Trump is the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 years. Democracy isn't when the Republicans win the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office. Democracy isn't even when every single state in the country, all 50 of them, vote red at a higher rate than they did just 4 years ago. No, according to these far-left radical progressives, democracy is when a bunch of idiots have a temper tantrum in the middle of the street, blocking traffic. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it's this sort of behavior that Americans across the country have just completely rejected. In fact, so much so that right this very moment, President Trump's approval ratings are back up to 53%, almost the highest they've ever been. And also, something worth noting here, this data comes in after Trump's tariffs had gone into effect and after the stock market had taken a dip. So folks, what this means is that the majority of Americans across the country realize that what Trump is doing right now really is for the greater good of the country. In fact, just yesterday, President Trump's Treasury Secretary, a guy named Scott Bessent, did a really great job of breaking down this entire situation. Take a look.
Would it have been really fun for me to come in and just keep issuing a lot of debt? And it's almost like a bodybuilder is taking steroids. Outside looks great. You're muscular. Inside, you're killing your vital organs. Yeah. That's what was going on here. But it would have been easy to keep pumping up the economy, borrowing a lot of money, creating a lot of government jobs. There was no controversy when we're doing all that. But you were going to end up in a calamity. If you go back and look, you look at the financial crisis in 07, 08. Economy looked great right up until then. You go back and you look at the end of the dot-com bubble and then the whole credit problem with the fraud at WorldCom, Enron, some other companies. Economy looked great until it didn't. And I think one of the things that we won't get credit for, but that this administration will have done, is avoiding a financial calamity.
And so, folks, as many of you know, everything he just said is 100% true. The economic policy of the Obama and Biden administrations was to keep on creating unnecessary jobs within the federal government and to keep on pumping up the federal budget. Effectively, they were trying to simulate economic activity, but here's the truth, not all economic activity is equal. As an example, let's say you have two jobs that both pay $75,000 a year. One job is teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion courses inside the Department of Education, while the other job is welding steel sheets together inside of an American automotive factory. You see, Barack Obama and Joe Biden would have us all believe that those two jobs are of equal economic importance, but as we all know, that's just absolutely ridiculous. The truth is that one of those jobs is actually producing a valuable economic output, whereas the other job is just producing progressive ideological brain rot. But so the truth is that you can sort of fake a healthy economy for a couple of years with over-the-top federal spending, but as you all know, at some point in the future, all of those chickens are going to come home to roost. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what Americans across the country have come to realize. And this is why President Trump's approval ratings have continued to soar. And now, folks, you know what? Let's be candid here for a moment. This country was built upon the sacrifices that our ancestors made for us. The reality is, the direction in which this country had been headed for the last couple of decades was completely unsustainable, and now President Trump is actually doing something to fix it. If we want to be able to promise an American future for our posterity, for our children, what President Trump is doing right now to fix our economy has to be done. There's really no other alternative. And so what that means is that we as a nation need to stop being so averse to temporary discomfort in the pursuit of making this country great again. In fact, I'll tell you what, if our great American ancestors second-guessed themselves every time they had to deal with a little bit of temporary discomfort, we wouldn't even have a country right now. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with all of that being said, I have to tell you, when I see Trump's approval ratings are going up as all of this turbulence is unfolding, it almost brings a tear to my eye. And the reason why is because it shows that the majority of Americans are on the same page right now. The majority of Americans understand that if we really want to make this country great again, we need to buckle down, we need to lock in. And you know what? That is exactly what we are doing right now. We are all collectively as a nation finally putting America first. And also, here's the truth. Trump's soaring approval ratings right now firmly shows that all of the left-wing propaganda is failing. No one is buying it anymore. When you really think about it, we all know that the only reason the progressive politicians and the left-wing propaganda media is freaking out so much right now is because they're all a part of this anti-American globalist racket that's been actively stripping America of its wealth for decades. We are all sick of these incompetent, petulant progressives manipulating the country into standing by and watching the nation implode. But more importantly, we are all sick of being told that we're evil for putting the interests of Americans living in America first. Ladies and gentlemen, those days are over, and you know what? Thank God that they are. Now, folks, before we wrap up with today's video, I want to say real quick that I've actually gone ahead and made a community Facebook page where I'll be posting additional news and updates as it relates to all of this. So, hey, if you guys use Facebook, check out the pinned comment down below and give that page a follow. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for this video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there. Hey, if you enjoy the daily news coverage, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton with my daily struggle here on YouTube. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.